Hello everyone, welcome back to Daily Lore with Grandpa Ben. Today we're embarking on one of the most ambitious journeys I've undertaken on this channel. We're going to explore the complete tragedy of order in Elden Ring, from the cosmic origins of the Greater Will, all the way through to the catastrophic shattering that left the lands between in ruins. Let's begin at the beginning, before the Erdtree, before Marika, before even the dragons. Let's start with the moment. Creation itself was fractured. Part 1, the cosmology of fractured creation, the one great and the original sin. In the beginning, according to the teachings whispered by those touched by the frenzied flame, there was the one great, not a god, not an entity with desires or ambitions, but a state of unified existence. Everything that would ever be already existed within this primordial wholeness. There was no separation, no individuality, no birth, and crucially, no death. The one great simply was. Then came the fracture. The greater will, a force dwelling in what the lore calls the lightless void or the great beyond, committed what the frenzied flame's adherents consider the original mistake. It shattered the one great. From this act of cosmic violence came everything we know, the separation of matter and energy, the creation of individual souls, the establishment of causality itself. Birth became possible, death became inevitable, suffering entered existence. This is the foundation upon which all of Elden Ring's tragedy is built. The very act of creation, of bringing forth the diverse and beautiful world of the lands between, was simultaneously an act of destruction. Something perfect and unified was broken so that multiplicity could exist. Whether you view this as a necessary evolution or as a catastrophic error depends entirely on your perspective, and this ambiguity runs through every layer of the game's philosophy. The Greater Will did not create from nothing. It reorganized what already existed, imposing structure and order on the formless potential of the One Great. This distinction matters tremendously. The Greater Will is not an omnipotent creator deity in the traditional sense. It is an architect, a designer of systems, a force that values pattern and structure above all else. And like any architect, it requires tools and agents to manifest its vision. The microcosm and the macrocosm, the cosmology of Elden Ring operates on a principle of reflection, of correspondence between scales. There is the microcosm, which is the world itself, the lands between, and all the physical reality we can perceive. Then there is the macrocosm, the great beyond, the lightless abyss, where the greater will resides. These are not separate realms in the traditional sense, but rather different scales of the same cosmic structure. The greater will exists in this outer darkness, and from there it sent forth its emissaries to shape the microcosm according to its design. First came Meteor, Mother of Fingers, described as the first falling star to arrive in the lands between. Meteor held between her tail fingers a microcosm of her own, a miniature reflection of the cosmos through which she could communicate with the greater will across the vast distance separating the macrocosm from the world below. But Meteor was not alone in her descent. The greater will sent a second golden star, and within it was the Elden Beast, the living incarnation of the concept of order itself. This beast served as the vassal of the greater will, and the Elden Ring itself became the fundamental law code governing reality in the lands between. The Elden Beast was the greater will's vision made manifest, a living being that would later house and protect the Elden Ring, a system of interlocking runes that would determine how life, death, causality, and regression functioned within the world. The Elden Ring is not merely an object, though it can take physical form. It is better understood as a metaphysical operating system, a set of rules that reality must obey. When we speak of Marika shattering the Elden Ring, we're not talking about breaking a piece of jewelry. We're talking about corrupting the fundamental laws of physics and metaphysics, causing reality itself to malfunction. The two fingers and the language of light. The greater will communicates through its agents using a language of light. The two fingers, offspring of Meteor, translate this luminous discourse into something approaching comprehensible guidance for the denizens of the lands between. But this communication is imperfect, filtered through multiple layers of interpretation. The two fingers themselves may move in patterns of light, but they require finger readers to translate their movements into language mortals can understand. This creates a problem that will echo throughout the entire history of the Golden Order. The gap between the greater will's actual intentions and what its followers believe those intentions to be. How much of what we know as the Greater Will's doctrine is truly divine mandate, and how much is merely interpretation, elaboration, or outright fabrication by those who claim to speak on its behalf? Count Ymir, the high priest encountered in the shadow of the Erdtree expansion, offers a particularly damning assessment of this system. He suggests that the two fingers themselves are flawed, perhaps even abandoned, their connection to the Greater Will long since severed or corrupted. Based on his philosophical musings about the Greater Will and the flaws in creation, we might infer that much of the Golden Order's history was built on the guidance of broken instruments, following commands from a god that may have stopped listening long ago. The outer gods, rivals in the cosmic arena. The Greater Will is not the only cosmic force vying for influence over the lands between. It exists in a pantheon of outer gods, though calling them a pantheon suggests more organization than actually exists. These entities are rivals, each representing different fundamental forces or philosophies, each seeking to impose their own form of order on reality. The frenzied flame represents absolute chaos, and the desire to return everything to the One Great, to undo the Greater Will's fracture and restore primordial unity through burning everything that exists. Its three fingers stand in opposition to the Greater Will's two fingers. Together they could be seen as forming the image of a complete hand, which has led some to theorize that these opposing forces might once have been aspects of a single entity, though this remains uncertain. The Scarlet Rot is governed by an unnamed outer god associated with decay, disease, and the cycle of decomposition and rebirth. This god influence predates the Erdtree, as evidenced by the ancient Lake of Rot deep beneath the earth. It found its vessel in Malenia, who was born cursed with the rot from the moment of her birth, a living conduit for decay's inevitable triumph over all living things. The formless mother, also called the Mother of Truth, craves wounds and bloodshed. She empowers those born with accursed blood, turning their suffering into weapon and their pain into power. Mog, the Lord of Blood, serves her utterly, and through him she seeks to establish a new dynasty built on the sacrament of blood. The outer god of death, associated with the ancient death birds and the ghost flame that burns with the cold of the grave, represents an older understanding of mortality than the Golden Order's controlled version. This death is not destiny determined by a rune or managed by divine will. It is the natural end, the inevitable return to stillness that all living things must eventually embrace. There are hints of others as well. The dark moon that Ranni serves might be an outer god in its own right, or at least a cosmic force of equivalent power. The fell god worshipped by the fire giants once held tremendous influence before being sealed away. The ancient god-devouring serpent predates written history and seems to exist in eternal hunger, consuming and growing without end. Each of these forces represents a different answer to the fundamental question: what should reality be? What principles should govern existence? The Greater Will chose order, structure, hierarchy, and controlled mortality. Others chose chaos, decay, blood, death, or darkness. And caught between these cosmic titans are the mortals of the lands between, whose lives become the battlefield where these philosophies wage eternal war. The Crucible, where all life was once blended. Before the Erdtree took its current golden form, there existed the Crucible, described in the lore as the primordial form of the Erdtree, where all life was blended together in formless chaos. The Crucible was not governed by the rigid categories and hierarchies that would later define the Golden Order. It was a state of biological potential where distinctions between species were fluid, where life could take any form. Those blessed by the Crucible bore its marks: horns, wings, tails, scales, all manner of features that would later be deemed monstrous by the Golden Order. The ancient Crucible Knights served this earlier, wilder version of the Erdtree's power, and their incantations tap into energies that the later Golden Order would classify as heretical or primitive. When Marika established the Golden Order and refined the Elden Ring to exclude certain runes and emphasize others, the Crucible's influence waned. What had once been divine aspects became seen as curses. The Omen, born with the Crucible's horns, became outcasts. The misbegotten, bearing animalistic features, were enslaved. The very diversity that the Crucible represented became anathema to the Order's vision of purity and hierarchy. This transition from Crucible to Erdtree represents a fundamental shift in philosophy. The Crucible accepted all forms of life as valid expressions of existence. The Golden Order demanded conformity to specific ideals, casting out anything that didn't fit its narrow definition of acceptable. This is how you get Morgoth and Mog, children of a goddess and an Elden Lord, imprisoned beneath the capital for the crime of being born with horns. The tragedy here is that the Crucible's aspects were not inherently evil or corrupting. They were simply different, expressions of an older and more inclusive understanding of what life could be. But order demands categories, and categories require exclusion. Something must be deemed acceptable, and something must be deemed wrong. The Golden Order drew those lines and enforced them with divine authority. The law of causality and the law of regression, the Elden Ring, in its function as reality's operating system, enforces two fundamental principles that govern all existence in the lands between: the law of causality and the law of regression. The law of causality is essentially the principle of cause and effect. Actions have consequences. Events unfold in sequences determined by prior events. This is the foundation of linear time, of narrative, of history itself. Without causality, there would be no before or after, no chain of events connecting one moment to the next. Reality would be incomprehensible chaos. The law of regression states that all things yearn to return to their original form, to converge back toward a unified state. This is the principle that draws scattered fragments back together, that makes restoration possible, that ensures patterns reassert themselves even after disruption. It is through the law of regression that we can reveal hidden truths, strip away illusions and see things as they truly are. These two laws work in tension with each other. Causality drives things forward, creating change and divergence. Regression pulls things backward, seeking unity and return. Together they create a kind of cosmic breathing, an oscillation between expansion and contraction, between diversity and unity. The Golden Order attempts to maintain a specific equilibrium point between these forces, freezing reality at a particular configuration that serves its purposes. But this equilibrium is fundamentally unstable. The very laws that enable order also make it vulnerable. Causality means that the Golden Order's actions have consequences it cannot fully control. Regression means that no matter how firmly Marika establishes her vision, there will always be forces pulling reality back toward earlier configurations, earlier forms, earlier truths. When Marika shatters the Elden Ring, she's not just breaking an object, she's disrupting these fundamental laws, throwing causality and regression into chaos. The shattering is reality itself malfunctioning, the cosmic operating system entering a fatal error state from which there seems to be no recovery. Part 2. The Age of Dragons and Placidusax's Eternal Vigil. The first Elden Lord, long before Marika ever ascended to godhood, long before the Golden Order established its dominion over the lands between, there was another age entirely. This was the Age of Dragons, a prehistoric era when the ancient dragons ruled the world from their royal capital of Faramazula. At the apex of this draconic civilization stood Dragonlord Placidusax, a massive ancient dragon who held the title of Elden Lord. The Old Lord's talisman depicts him with 4 heads, though by the time we encounter him, he has only 2 remaining, the others lost to some ancient conflict. This fact alone is tremendously significant. Placidusax was an Elden Lord in the age before the Erdtree, which means there was an Elden Ring before Marika's version, configured differently, serving different purposes, governing reality according to different principles. Placidusax ruled not in service to the greater will, but rather as consort to another god entirely. We don't know this god's name or nature. All we know is that at some point this god fled, abandoned Placidusax, abandoned Faramazula, abandoned the entire Age of Dragons, and Placidusax, faithful unto the end, withdrew to a place beyond time itself to await his god's return. Think about the implications of this, the structure we associate with the Golden Order, with Marika's reign, with the Two Fingers guidance. This is not original. It's not even the first iteration. There have been other gods, other configurations of the Elden Ring, other ages with their own forms of order. The Greater Will has been playing this game for a very long time, cycling through different implementations of its vision, different champions, different systems of control. Placidusax's god fled. We don't know why. Perhaps they rebelled against the greater will's design, much as Marika would later do. Perhaps they were overthrown. Perhaps they simply lost faith in the whole enterprise and chose exile over continued participation in a system that had lost its meaning. The game doesn't tell us, but their departure left Placidusax alone, ruling over an age that was already ending, waiting for a return that would never come. The dragons and their gravel-stone scales. The ancient dragons were not merely large flying reptiles. They were beings of tremendous power, their bodies composed of gravel stone that made them nearly invulnerable. They wielded red lightning, a primeval force that predated the golden lightning associated with the Erdtree. Their very scales possessed properties that could affect time itself, which is why the ancient dragon smithing stones can strengthen weapons to the point where they become capable of slaying gods. The dragons formed the foundation of Farum Azula's society, protected by armies of beastmen who served as their priests and warriors. These beastmen were granted 5 fingers, a sign of heightened intelligence bestowed upon them by their Dragonlords. This detail becomes significant later when we consider the symbolism of fingers in relation to the greater will and the 2 fingers versus the 3 fingers of the frenzied flame. Farum Azula itself existed as a royal capital floating in a storm beyond time, a place where the normal flow of causality seemed suspended or distorted. This temporal anomaly may have been an intentional feature of the dragon's rule, a way of preserving their age even as the world below moved forward into new configurations. Or it may have been a side effect of Placidusax's grief, his desperate attempt to freeze time at the moment before his god departed, to create a bubble of eternity where he could wait forever without the universe moving on without him. The fall of the Dragon Age, the Age of Dragons, came to an end not through some dramatic cataclysm, but through a gradual transition as the greater will shifted its favor to a new champion. Queen Marika the Eternal emerged as the next vessel for the Elden Ring, and with her came the Golden Order and the Age of the Erdtree. But the transition was not entirely peaceful. The ancient dragon Grandsax attacked Leyndell, the royal capital of the Golden Order, in what is described as the only time in recorded history that Leyndell's walls fell. This assault represents either a last desperate attempt by the dragons to resist the new order, or perhaps a test, a challenge to see if the Golden Age was truly ready to assume dominion over the lands between. Godwyn the Golden, Marika's son with her first consort Godfrey, led the defense against Grandsax and ultimately prevailed. But rather than simply slaying the dragon, Godwyn befriended it. This friendship between the Golden Prince and the fallen dragon became the foundation of the ancient dragon cult in Leyndell, a reconciliation between the old age and the new. The dragons would find a place in the Golden Order, not as rulers, but as revered allies, their lightning incantations integrated into the Golden Order's magical traditions. Ancient dragon Placidusax became particularly close with Godwyn, and this friendship would have profound consequences later. When Godwyn was struck down during the Night of the Black Knives and his soul was destroyed while his body lived on, becoming the Prince of Death, Placidusax entered Godwyn's death dream in a desperate attempt to combat the death blight from within. The dragon fought valiantly but was ultimately corrupted by the death spreading through Godwyn's undying flesh, becoming a lich dragon in the process. This shows us something important about the dragons. They were capable of tremendous loyalty and genuine affection. Placidusax didn't have to try to save Godwyn. The prince was already lost, but the dragon tried anyway, sacrificing its own purity in a hopeless battle against death itself, all for the sake of a friend, Placidusax, and the waiting beyond time. While the world moved on, while Marika built her empire and Godwyn made friends with dragons and the Golden Order spread across the lands between, Placidusax remained in his storm beyond time, waiting, always waiting. His body bore terrible wounds, having lost several of his heads in some ancient conflict, most likely in his failed attempt to protect his departing god, or in the war with Baal the Dread, a dragon who betrayed him. The remembrance of the Dragonlord tells us that he continued to await his god's return, even as Farum Azula crumbled around him. The city was described as having been slowly falling apart since time immemorial, a monument to an age that refused to fully end, even as it clearly could not continue. When the Tarnished eventually finds Placidusax and challenges him, we're not fighting a conquering tyrant or a mad beast. We're fighting a grief-stricken lord who has waited beyond the end of time itself for a reunion that will never come. His attacks are devastating. His command of red lightning absolute. His ability to manipulate time and space evident in every phase of the battle. But underlying all that power is a profound sadness, a loneliness that has endured for ages uncounted. Placidusax represents the first great tragedy of the Elden Ring's history, the tragedy of absolute loyalty given to something that cannot or will not return that devotion. His god fled. They had reasons, perhaps good ones, but they left Placidusax behind, and he loved them enough to wait forever, to refuse to move on, to make himself a prisoner of hope that had long since ceased to have any rational foundation. This theme of loyalty despite abandonment, of love persisting past all reason, echoes throughout Elden Ring. We see it in Fortisax's doomed attempt to save Godwyn. We see it in Morgott's devoted defense of an Erdtree that never gave him grace. We see it in Bled's madness when his nature as a shadow bound to Ranni conflicts with her defiance of the Two Fingers. Placidusax is the first, and perhaps the purest example of this particularly devastating form of tragedy. The Beastmen and the Five Fingers. The Beastmen of Farum Azula deserve particular attention because they represent a form of civilization that predates the Golden Order's categories and hierarchies. They were granted 5 fingers as a mark of intelligence, and they served the dragons not as slaves but as priests and guardians, maintaining the mausoleum that Farum Azula became after Placidusax withdrew beyond time. In the catacombs beneath Farum Azula, we find statues depicting ancient dragons surrounded by beastmen dressed in clerical garb, suggesting a religious or sacred relationship between the two species. The beastmen weren't merely servants, they were devotees, maintaining sacred rituals and preserving the memory of the Dragon Age even as the world below forgot. But Farum Azula also contained something troubling, signs of Deathroot and the presence of Malekith, the Black Blade, who serves Marika but exists in this place beyond time. This temporal confusion creates a kind of paradox. Malekith guards the Rune of Death for Marika, yet he appears in Farum Azula, which should predate Marika's age, unless time in Farum Azula is so thoroughly broken that past and future exist simultaneously, or unless Malekith has been fulfilling his duty across multiple ages, serving different configurations of the Elden Ring for different gods across vast spans of time. The intelligence that the dragons granted to the beastmen came with a cost, the burden of consciousness. The beastmen gained the capacity for complex thought, for faith, for loyalty, for grief. They became aware of time and loss. And when their age ended, when their Dragonlords fell or fled, the beastmen remained, guarding empty halls, maintaining rituals whose original meanings had been lost, faithful to the end, even though the end had come and gone long ago. Part 3. The Nox and the Rebellion Against the Stars, the Eternal Cities and the Night Sky. Deep beneath the surface of the lands between, hidden far from the light of the Erdtree, lie the eternal cities of Nokron and Noxtella. These subterranean metropolises are home to the Nox, a people who lived during an age when fate was governed by the stars in the night sky rather than by the Golden Order. The Nox developed a sophisticated civilization with unique technologies, including flowing silver weapons, mimic tears that could assume other forms, and advanced understanding of the relationship between the stars and destiny. They believed that a Lord of Night would one day come, a ruler who would usher in an age of stars where fate would return to being determined by the cosmos rather than by the Elden Ring. This put them in direct conflict with the Greater Will's vision of order. The Golden Order seeks to control destiny through the Elden Ring, through codified laws and divine mandate. The star-based fate that the Nox revered operated by entirely different principles, cosmic and impersonal, rather than deliberately designed. These are fundamentally incompatible worldviews. The sin of the Nox and divine punishment. The Nox committed what the lore describes as a grave affront to the Greater Will. According to various item descriptions, they attempted to create artificial life, specifically trying to forge a Lord of Night to serve their purposes. This was an act of profound blasphemy from the Greater Will's perspective. The creation of life, the determination of who holds divine power, these are prerogatives that the Greater Will reserves for itself. For mortals to attempt to manufacture their own god was an intolerable challenge to the entire cosmic hierarchy. The Greater Will's response was devastating and absolute.
It sent Astel, natural born of the void, a malformed star born in the lightless abyss where the greater will dwells. Astel destroyed the eternal city's false sky,
the illusory night ceiling they had created underground, effectively burying them even deeper beneath the earth. The Nox were cast down from their civilization into perpetual darkness, condemned to dwell in complete isolation from the stars they once worshipped. Their age of stars indefinitely postponed, but they were not destroyed. The greater will could have annihilated them completely, but chose instead to imprison them, to make them an example of what happens when mortals dare to challenge divine authority. The Nox would continue to exist, continue to remember what they had sought to achieve, continue to yearn for the age of stars, but they would do so in darkness, cut off from the celestial forces they had once tried to harness. This punishment created something important. A people with grudges, with memories of a better time, with knowledge of how to resist the greater will's dominion. The Nox would not forget, and when opportunities for revenge presented themselves, they would be ready. The Black Knife Assassins and the Night of Conspiracy. Centuries or perhaps millennia after the fall of the Eternal Cities, the Nox may have finally found their opportunity for revenge. The Black Knife Assassins are described as Numen women, and the sorcerer Rogier suggests they were rumored to have come from the Eternal City, though this connection isn't definitively confirmed. Regardless of their exact origins, these assassins were recruited for a conspiracy that would shake the foundations of the Golden Order itself, the Night of the Black Knives. These assassins were all women, clad in silver armor hidden beneath dark cloaks, wielding daggers that had been imbued with a fragment of the Rune of Death through a fearsome rite conducted by Ranni the Witch. Their target was Godwyn the Golden, the most beloved of Marika's children, the Golden Prince who had brought peace between dragons and the Golden Order. If the assassins truly did originate from the Eternal Cities, they would have had every reason to participate in an act that would destabilize the Golden Order. The assassination of a demigod, especially one who represented the Golden Order's finest achievements, would serve as a form of cosmic revenge against the power structure that had buried their civilization beneath the earth. But the Night of the Black Knives was more complex than simple revenge. Ranni masterminded the plot with specific goals in mind: to free herself from the Two Fingers' control and to kill her physical body while preserving her soul. The assassination of Godwyn was necessary for this ritual to work. According to Ranni herself, someone's soul had to die for hers to survive. Why Godwyn specifically was chosen remains unclear, though the symbolic weight of killing the Golden Order's most beloved prince certainly served Ranni's larger purpose of destabilizing Marika's reign. The Nox assassins carried out their part perfectly. They infiltrated the royal capital during a night of wintry fog, struck down Godwyn with their death-imbued blades, and carved into his flesh the curse mark of death. Simultaneously, Ranni took her own life, carving the other half of the curse mark into her own body. The result was a split death. Godwyn died in soul but lived in body, becoming the Prince of Death. Ranni died in body but lived in soul, transferring her consciousness into a miniature doll crafted in the image of her mentor. The Fingerslayer blade in the deepest blasphemy. But the Nox's contribution to resisting the greater will didn't end with providing assassins. They also created one of the most significant artifacts in the entire game, the Fingerslayer blade. This weapon, forged from a corpse and described as proof of the ancient conspiracy against the greater will, has the specific purpose of slaying the envoys of the outer gods, particularly the Two Fingers. The existence of this weapon is itself a statement. The Nox developed the capability to kill beings that should be unkillable, envoys of cosmic forces that exist beyond normal mortality. This required tremendous knowledge of metaphysics, of the relationship between the outer gods and their manifestations in the world, of vulnerabilities that could be exploited even in seemingly invulnerable entities. Ranni eventually obtains the Fingerslayer blade and uses it to kill her Two Fingers, severing the connection between herself and the greater will permanently. This is the culmination of both Ranni's plan and the Nox's ancient conspiracy. After all their centuries of imprisonment, after all their suffering, the Nox finally achieved what they had sought, a genuine blow against the greater will's control over the world. Nokron, Nokstella, and the nameless Eternal City. Each of the Eternal Cities has its own character and history. Nokron, discovered after defeating Star Scourge Radon and allowing the stars to fall, contains the fossilized remains of an ancient dragon and numerous silver tears. The mimics that the Nox created as part of their experiments with artificial life. The city, is a monument to ambition and the terrible price paid for daring to challenge gods. Noxtella, accessed through the Lake of Rot, sits at the terminus of an underground river and contains evidence of the Nox's continued worship of the Age of Stars. Here we find statues of swordswoman servants, similar to those in the temples of oaths above ground, suggesting ongoing religious practices maintained across the ages. The presence of architectural ruins similar to Nokron and Noxtella in other locations suggests that the Nox civilization may have been more extensive than just these two major cities we can explore, though we don't have confirmed names for other eternal cities. The mimic tears and silver tears, the Nox's ability to create mimic tears, beings that could perfectly assume the form and abilities of other entities, represents a level of biotechnology or perhaps biosorcery that rivals anything achieved by the Golden Order. These creatures are made from solidified silver tears, presumably the same substance that flows through the veins of the Nox themselves, given that they're described as having silver blood. The mimic tears serve multiple purposes in Nox society. They can infiltrate other civilizations by assuming the forms of their members. They can serve as soldiers who adapt to any combat situation. They can even act as decoys or duplicates of important individuals. This technology alone makes the Nox a continued threat to any established order, because how can you trust that anyone is who they claim to be when shapeshifters exist? The legendary spirit ashes of the mimic tear allow the Tarnished to summon a perfect duplicate of themselves, complete with all their equipment and abilities. This is probably one of the Nox's greatest achievements, the ability to duplicate not just physical form, but also skill, knowledge, and power. In a world where strength often determines who rules, the ability to duplicate strength makes you a kingmaker. The Age of Stars, the Nox's eternal dream, despite their imprisonment, despite their punishment, the Nox never abandoned their dream of the Age of Stars. They continued to wait for a Lord of Night, a ruler who would restore the stellar determination of fate and free the world from the Greater Will's rigid order. Ranni's ending, the Age of Stars, could represent the fulfillment of the Nox's ancient dream. When Ranni becomes a goddess and takes the Tarnished as her consort, she doesn't restore the Elden Ring in any traditional sense. Based on her dialogue, she removes the Greater Will's direct influence, establishing an order governed by the Dark Moon and the stars. This resembles the star-based fate the Nox once worshipped before the Greater Will's dominance. For the Nox, this represents ultimate vindication. After all the suffering, after all the waiting, after all the centuries of dwelling in darkness, their vision finally comes to pass. The Age of Stars isn't chaos or destruction. It's a return to an older order, a cosmological arrangement where the Greater Will doesn't get to dictate reality's fundamental rules. But there's a sadness in this too. The Nox who first dreamed of the Age of Stars are long dead. The specific individuals who suffered the Greater Will's punishment will never see their revenge come to fruition. Like Placidusax waiting for his god, like the Beastmen maintaining empty rituals, the Nox continued to serve a dream that most of them would never witness becoming reality. Part 4. Marika's Ascension and the Golden Order's Foundation. The Newman and the Lands of Shadow. Queen Marika the Eternal was born a Newman, a race of beings who came from outside the lands between. The Newman are described as having longevity far exceeding normal humans, and they seem to possess special qualities that make them suitable candidates for godhood. The Black Knife Assassins were Newman women, suggesting that Marika's people had their own complicated relationship with the power structures she would eventually build. The Shadow of the Erdtree expansion reveals that Marika's origins lie in the Land of Shadow, a realm deliberately hidden and sealed away by her when she ascended to godhood. This land was home to the Hornsent, a civilization that practiced horrific rituals involving the jarring of bodies, stuffing living people into pots to create saints through fusion of multiple beings. Marika's people, the shamans from the village where she was born, were victims of these rituals. They were particularly valued by the Hornsent for their ability to blend or meld, making them ideal components for the saint jars. Marika's grandmother was among those who suffered this fate. The trauma of watching her people systematically destroyed by the Hornsent's religious practices would define Marika's entire approach to godhood. When Marika eventually gained power, her revenge was absolute. She waged a genocidal war against the Hornsent, led by her son Mesmer the Impaler, burning their civilization to the ground and sealing the entire Land of Shadow away beneath a veil. This wasn't mere political conquest. This was the systematic annihilation of a people who had tormented hers. The Gate of Divinity and Marika's Ascension. Marika ascended to godhood through the Gate of Divinity, a structure located in the Land of Shadow that seems to facilitate the transformation of Empyreans into true gods. This process appears to require tremendous sacrifice. The gate itself was built by the Hornsent using the bodies and souls of thousands of their people, creating a monument to suffering that would become the instrument of their destroyer's ascension. When Marika passed through the Gate of Divinity, she didn't simply become powerful, she became the vessel for the Elden Ring itself, bonding with the Elden Beast and taking on the responsibility of maintaining order in the lands between. The Greater Will chose her, whether because of her Numen heritage, her strength of will, or her burning desire for revenge against a world that had taken everything from her. But this choice came with conditions. An Empyrean chosen by the Two Fingers cannot simply do as they please. They are expected to maintain the order as the Greater Will envisions it, to propagate the system, to ensure that reality continues to function according to divine design. Marika would spend her entire reign struggling against these constraints, trying to find room for her own will within a role that seemed to allow for none. The first Elden Lord, Godfrey and the Long March. Marika's first consort was Hoara Luke, a warrior of tremendous strength and savage temperament. To make him suitable as Elden Lord, to temper his bloodlust and channel it toward productive ends, Marika had the beast regent Serash attach itself to Hoara Luke's back. This transformed him into Godfrey, a more measured and controlled warrior capable of leading armies and building empires. Godfrey served Marika faithfully, waging wars of conquest to establish the Golden Order's dominion across the lands between. He defeated the Stormlord, subjugated the Fire Giants, and led campaigns against any who refused to bow to the Erdtree. His strength was legendary, his loyalty absolute, his accomplishments unmatched. Marika bore 3 children with Godfrey: Godwyn the Golden, who was perfect in every way, beloved by all who knew him, and twin omens, Morgot and Moog, who were born cursed with horns and accursed blood. The birth of the Omen twins was particularly devastating for Marika, because the Golden Order's own doctrines demanded that omens be shunned and hidden away. Her own children, offspring of a god and an Elden Lord, had to be imprisoned beneath the capital simply for being born wrong. The war against the Fire Giants and the sealing of the Fell God. One of the most significant conflicts of Marika's early reign was the war against the Fire Giants, a race of massive beings who served the Fell God, an entity associated with fire, ruin, and destruction. The Fire Giants protected the Flame of Ruin, a force capable of burning the Erdtree itself, making them an existential threat to the Golden Order. Godfrey led the Golden Order's forces against the Fire Giants in a campaign of extermination. The war was brutal and total. The Fire Giants were hunted down and slaughtered until only one remained, imprisoned alone atop the mountaintops of the Giants, cursed to be the eternal guardian of the flame he had once served. But the true target wasn't just the Fire Giants, it was the Fell God itself. Marika had the Fell God sealed away, its power diminished, its followers destroyed. This established a pattern that would define the Golden Order, the systematic suppression of rival cosmic forces and the civilizations that served them. The victory over the Fire Giants came at a cost, however. Something in that war changed Godfrey. The remembrance items suggest that after the last of Marika's enemies fell, the hue faded from Godfrey's eyes. He had achieved everything asked of him. There were no more battles to fight, no more conquests to pursue. And in that moment of complete victory, he somehow lost the grace of gold, the banishment of the tarnished. Marika's response to Godfrey losing grace was shocking. She banished him and all his warriors from the lands between, stripping them of the Erdtree's grace and sending them on what would be called the Long March to lands far beyond. These exiles became the first tarnished, people who had once held grace but lost it. This banishment seems incomprehensibly cruel at first. Godfrey had served perfectly, had accomplished everything asked of him, and his reward was exile. But some lore scholars theorize that Marika was planning something even then, creating a reserve of warriors who existed outside the Greater Will's direct influence, who could one day return and potentially challenge the order she herself was beginning to question. The fact that grace would eventually return to guide the tarnished back to the lands between during the shattering lends some credence to this interpretation. The tarnished would wander distant lands for generations, living and dying without grace, until the shattering occurred. Only then, when the Golden Order collapsed and the Elden Ring shattered, would grace return to the Tarnished, guiding them back to the lands between as potential candidates to become Elden Lord. Godfrey's exile allowed him to remove Serosh and return to being Hora Lux, unleashing his full savage strength without the Beast Regent's restraint. When we face him at the end of the game, he has reclaimed his original nature, fighting with pure physical might rather than the measured techniques of a civilized lord. He's finally free to be what he always was beneath the veneer of lordship, and there's a tragic beauty in that, even if it comes at the end of his life. The removal of destined death, perhaps Marika's most consequential act, was removing the rune of death from the Elden Ring and entrusting it to her half-brother Malekith for safekeeping. This fundamentally altered how death functioned in the lands between. No longer would beings die true deaths and pass beyond. Instead, their souls would be absorbed by the Erdtree, recycled back into the world through a process of reincarnation. This change made the demigods effectively immortal. They could be wounded, even grievously, but they couldn't truly die. Their souls were too powerful, too valuable, to be allowed to pass beyond. This would have catastrophic consequences during the shattering, because wars where neither side can truly kill the other tend to drag on indefinitely. The removal of destined death also meant that certain natural cycles could no longer complete. Those who live in death, undead beings unable to properly die, began to appear and multiply. The Erdtree started to malfunction, no longer able to properly process the souls it absorbed because death itself had become corrupted. Malekith took his responsibility seriously, becoming Marika's most loyal defender and the one being all the demigods truly feared. He could kill them permanently with his black blade, making him the ultimate threat to any who might rebel against Marika's rule. But the rune of death couldn't remain sealed forever. Ranni would eventually steal a fragment of it, setting in motion events that would destroy the very order that Marika had worked so hard to establish. The removal of death created an unstable system, and the Night of the Black Knives would prove to be the moment when that instability became catastrophic. The creation of the Golden Order fundamentalism to justify and explain the rules of her new order, Marika, or perhaps her priests and scholars working in her name, developed Golden Order fundamentalism, a discipline that treated the laws of the Elden Ring as objective truth to be studied and mastered. This wasn't merely theology. It was a complete worldview that encompassed cosmology, physics, metaphysics, and morality. Golden Order fundamentalism teaches that the greater will is the ultimate source of truth and meaning, that the Erdtree is the center of creation, that the Elden Ring's configuration represents perfect order. It provides mathematical and logical frameworks for understanding how reality functions, turning religious belief into something approaching scientific certainty. But fundamentalism also becomes a tool of oppression, or it declares that certain things are inherently correct and others inherently wrong, not as matters of preference or culture, but as cosmic facts. The crucible aspects become profane, not because they're actually harmful, but because they don't fit the fundamentalist categorization scheme. Omens are shunned, not because of anything they've done, but because their existence is classified as aberrant by fundamentalist doctrine. The tragedy of fundamentalism is that it starts from genuine insight into how the Elden Ring functions and turns it into rigid orthodoxy that can't adapt to new information or changing circumstances. It becomes its own prison, constraining even Marika herself. Part 5. The Paradox of Marika and Radagon. The Revelation and the Mystery. One of the most shocking revelations in Elden Ring comes when the Tarnished discovers a statue of Radagon in Lanedell and uses the law of regression incantation to reveal the truth hidden within. Marika is Radagon. These are not two separate people who merged. They are and have always been one being, somehow existing as both male and female, warrior and goddess, loyal servant of the Golden Order and its potential destroyer. This isn't simply gender fluidity or shape-shifting. The lore makes clear that Marika and Radagon have separate consciousnesses, separate wills, sometimes acting in direct opposition to each other. When Marika shatters the Elden Ring, Radagon attempts to repair it. They are genuinely in conflict despite sharing a body and a divine essence. The exact nature of this duality is never fully explained. We don't know if they were always one being that manifested as two, or if at some point Marika created Radagon from herself, or if they were once separate and merged later. The mystery is fundamental to the tragedy. The alchemical ribbies, symbolically, Marika and Radagon represent the alchemical concept of the ribbies, the divine hermaphrodite created when the Red King and White Queen unite in the great work. In alchemical tradition, this union represents the culmination of the process of transformation, the achievement of spiritual perfection through the marriage of opposites. But in Elden Ring, this perfected unity is also a curse. Marika and Radagon cannot truly be separate, but they cannot truly be unified either. They exist in constant tension, each pulling in different directions, their shared body a battleground for competing visions of what the Golden Order should be. Radagon embodies perfect loyalty to the Golden Order. He champions fundamentalism, creates incantations that exemplify its principles, and seems genuinely devoted to maintaining the system exactly as the Greater Will designed it. His red hair, inherited from the fire giants he helped destroy, serves as a permanent mark of his role as the Order's champion. He even came to despise this hair, trying to change it to gold through incantation, rejecting his association with the enemies he'd defeated. Marika, by contrast, gradually becomes disillusioned with the order she established. Her spoken echoes, the words Malenia can recite at various churches, reveal a God questioning her purpose, wondering if she made mistakes, even speaking directly to Radagon as if to another person despite them being the same being. Radagon and Rennala, the marriage of politics. At some point in the Golden Order's history, Radagon married Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon and ruler of the Academy of Raya Lucaria. Whether Radagon existed as a separate entity from Marika at this time, or whether this represents Marika operating through a different aspect of herself, remains one of the great mysteries of the lore. What we know for certain is that this was a political marriage designed to end the war between the Golden Order and the Carian royal family, bringing the sorcerers of Raya Lucaria under the Erdtree's dominion. Radagon and Rennala's union produced 3 children, Radon, Rykard, and Ranni. All 3 were tremendously powerful, inheriting Radagon's red hair and martial prowess, as well as magical capabilities from both parents. They were considered demigods despite having only one divine parent, suggesting that Radagon's connection to Marika granted divine status even when he operated separately from her. But eventually, Marika called Radagon back to her side. Perhaps her first Elden Lord Godfrey had been exiled, leaving the position vacant. Perhaps Marika needed Radagon's strength and devotion to reinforce the Golden Order at a moment of crisis. Whatever the reason, Radagon abandoned Rennala and returned to Leyndell. The abandonment destroyed Rennala. She had genuinely loved Radagon, and when he left, taking much of her power with him in the form of the Great Rune he returned to her as parting gift, she retreated into madness and obsession. She would spend the rest of her life attempting to rebirth her children over and over through arcane means, unable to accept that her family was broken beyond repair. The twin Empyreans, Miquella and Malenia, when Radagon became Marika's second consort, or when the dual being's nature became more fully expressed, they conceived twin children, Miquella and Malenia. These twins were Empyreans, potential future vessels for the Elden Ring, candidates chosen by the Two Fingers to possibly succeed Marika as the next god. But both were born cursed in ways that made their Empyrean status almost mockingly cruel. Miquella was afflicted with eternal childhood, unable to age past a certain point despite his tremendous intelligence and power. Malenia was infected from birth with scarlet rot, the influence of an outer god that steadily consumed her body, claiming her eyes and limbs despite Miquella's best efforts to slow the corruption. The fact that these children, born from what appears to be Marika's union with herself through Radagon, were so deeply cursed raises disturbing questions. Was this punishment from the Greater Will for Marika's growing doubts about the Golden Order? Was it a consequence of the unnatural nature of their conception? Or were outer gods other than the Greater Will interfering, marking potential future threats to their own plans for the world? The game offers no definitive answers, leaving us to interpret these tragedies. Miquella devoted himself to finding cures for both their afflictions. He abandoned Golden Order fundamentalism when it proved incapable of addressing Malenia's rot, developing instead the concept of unalloyed gold, a pure substance that could resist the influence of outer gods. He created the Erdtree, attempting to grow a replacement for the Erdtree that wouldn't be bound to the greater will's influence. He crafted needles of unalloyed gold to slow Malenia's corruption. But all his efforts ultimately failed. He couldn't cure Malenia's rot completely. He couldn't escape his own curse of eternal youth, and his grand plan to replace the Golden Order through the Erdtree was thwarted when Mohg kidnapped his slumbering form, taking him to Mohgwyn Palace to serve the formless mother's purposes. The duality as divine burden, the tragedy of Marika and Radagon's existence, is that neither can be what they need to be while bound to the other. Radagon cannot fully serve the Golden Order because Marika's doubts and rebellions undermine his efforts. Marika cannot break free from the Order because Radagon's loyalty constantly works to repair and reinforce what she tries to destroy. Their hammer, wielded as both weapon and tool, symbolizes this perfectly. A hammer can create and destroy in equal measure. It can forge and shatter, and Marika and Radagon are forever oscillating between these opposed purposes, unable to commit fully to either construction or destruction because they are both at once. When Marika finally shatters the Elden Ring, Radagon immediately begins trying to repair it. The hammer strikes in one direction, then the other. Create, destroy, an endless cycle that achieves nothing except perpetual motion. This is the ultimate futility of their existence. No matter what one does, the other undoes it. The Elden Beast eventually punishes this disobedience by crucifying both Marika and Radagon together, merging them completely and imprisoning them within the Erdtree. When the Tarnished finally faces them, we fight Radagon first, the loyal defender still trying to protect the Order. But when he falls, the Elden Beast emerges from within him, revealing that Marika and Radagon together were merely the vessel for something far larger and more alien. Malena's testimony, Marika's doubts. Throughout the game, Malenia can recite words spoken by Marika at various churches, giving us glimpses into the goddess's thoughts and doubts. These spoken echoes reveal a being who has grown increasingly uncertain about the path she's taken, about the order she's built, about the purpose of it all. To her children, Marika says, "Make of thyselves that which ye desire, be it a lord, be it a god. But should ye fail to become aught at all, ye will be forsaken." This is simultaneously liberating and terrifying. She's telling her children they can choose their own paths, that she won't force them into preordained roles. But she's also warning them that failure means abandonment, that there's no safety net, no unconditional love. To Radagon, she speaks more directly. "O Radagon, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become me, thou art yet to become a god. Let us be shattered both, mine other self." She's addressing him as separate, even though they're the same, acknowledging his loyalty while also planning to destroy everything he's devoted himself to protecting. These echoes paint a picture of a god who regrets what she's become, who sees the Golden Order as a cage she helped build around herself and everyone else, who wants to break free but doesn't know how without destroying everything, including herself. Marika's tragedy is that she has all the power in the world except the power to escape the role that power forced her into. Part 6, The Night of the Black Knives. The conspiracy begins. The Night of the Black Knives was not a spontaneous act of violence, but a carefully orchestrated conspiracy involving multiple parties with different motivations. At its center was Ranni the Witch, a demigod daughter of Radagon and Renala, an Empyrean selected by the Two Fingers to potentially succeed Marika as the next god. But Ranni wanted no part of divine destiny. Based on her dialogue and actions throughout the game, we can infer that she saw the Two Fingers' plans for her as slavery, a preordained path that would strip away her agency and turn her into another puppet dancing to the greater will's design. To escape this fate, she needed to die, but not in a way that would simply result in her soul being absorbed by the Erdtree and recycled back into existence. She needed a specific kind of death, a way to kill her body while preserving her soul's autonomy. And for that, she needed the Rune of Death, which Malekith guarded on Marika's behalf. The theft and the right, somehow Ranni or her allies managed to steal a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith. This theft alone is staggering in its implications. Malekith was considered the most dangerous being in the lands between, feared even by demigods for his ability to inflict permanent death. How anyone managed to take even a piece of the rune from him is never fully explained. With this fragment in hand, Ranni performed a fearsome rite, imbuing black knife daggers with the power of destined death. These weapons would be capable of killing gods, of inflicting true death that even the Erdtree couldn't reverse. She provided these daggers to the Black Knife assassins, Numen women from the Eternal Cities who had their own reasons to hate the Golden Order. The simultaneous death on a night of wintry fog, the conspiracy struck. The Black Knife assassins infiltrated Lindell and murdered Godwyn the Golden, stabbing him with the cursed daggers and carving into his body one half of the curse mark of death. Simultaneously, Ranni killed herself, carving the other half of the curse mark into her own flesh. The result was a split death, a division of the concept of mortality itself. Godwyn died in soul but lived in body, his flesh continuing to exist and even grow despite having no animating consciousness or will. Ranni died in body but lived in soul, her spirit transferring into a miniature doll crafted in the image of her mentor, the Snow Witch, while her original body was hidden away. This was the first time in recorded history that a demigod had died, the first breach in the immortality that Marika's removal of destined death had created. The implications were immediately devastating. If one demigod could die, all of them could. The certainties of the Golden Order, the eternal nature of Marika's children, the fundamental rules of existence, all of it was suddenly in question. Godwyn's transformation into the Prince of Death. Without a soul to guide it, Godwyn's body began to undergo a horrific transformation. He had been buried at the roots of the Erdtree, in the deepest parts of Lindell, likely with the expectation that the Erdtree would absorb him and he would be reborn. Instead, lacking a soul to rebirth, his flesh started to corrupt the Erdtree itself. Deathroot spread from Godwyn's corpse throughout the Erdtree's root system, reaching locations far from the capital. Wherever Deathroot appeared, those who live in death would manifest. Undead beings unable to properly die, trapped in a state between life and true death. Godwyn's face, transformed into a grotesque disc of fungal-like flesh with vacant eyes, began appearing in multiple locations, his body somehow existing in many places at once. The Prince of Death became a corruption at the heart of the Golden Order itself. His continued existence, undying yet not truly alive, spreading death through a system designed to maintain eternal life, was a cancer that could never be excised because removing him would require cutting out the Erdtree's roots, destroying the very foundation of Marika's world. Placidusax's attempt to save Godwyn by entering his death dream represents both the nobility and futility of loyalty. The ancient dragon fought for ages inside Godwyn's corrupted consciousness, battling the death blight from within, ultimately becoming infected himself and transforming into a lich dragon. All this effort, all this sacrifice, accomplished nothing except transforming Placidusax into another victim of the death that couldn't properly complete. The castle's soul eclipse and Miquella's failed solution, Godwyn's half-brother Miquella, perhaps unable to bear seeing his beloved sibling in such a state, worked with the Knights of Castle Sol to achieve an eclipse they believed would restore Godwyn's soul to his body, allowing him to die properly. They built elaborate structures, conducted complex rituals, prayed to the sun and moon for intervention. They failed. The eclipse never came, or if it did, it accomplished nothing. Godwyn remained the Prince of Death, and Miquella's failure in this matter may have contributed to his growing disillusionment with the Golden Order. If even an Empyrean with Miquella's intelligence and power couldn't solve the problem of Godwyn's half-death, what hope did anyone have? The failure of the eclipse also contributed to the doom of the Erdtree. With Miquella's attention divided between curing Malenia's rot and trying to resurrect Godwyn, he couldn't focus fully on either project. The Erdtree never matured into a full replacement for the Erdtree. Malenia's rot continued to progress, and Godwyn remained trapped in his impossible existence. Fia and the Mending Rune of the Death Prince. The deathbed companion, Fia, offers a different approach to Godwyn's tragedy. Rather than trying to restore him to life or grant him true death, she seeks to embrace what he's become and incorporate it into a new order. By lying with Godwyn, by granting him what she calls a second life as the Prince of Death, she conceives the Mending Rune of the Death Prince. This rune, if used to repair the Elden Ring, would create an Age of the Duskborn, an order where death and life are not opposites, but rather parts of a continuous cycle. Those who live in death would no longer be persecuted as abominations, but accepted as natural expressions of existence. Death would be freed from the Erdtree's control, allowed to function according to older principles that predate the Golden Order. There's something beautiful in this vision, a kind of dark grace. Rather than seeing Godwin's state as purely tragic, Fire reframes it as a potential foundation for a gentler order, one that doesn't try to conquer death, but instead finds meaning in accepting it as part of life's continuum. Marika's response: the shattering. The Night of the Black Knives broke something fundamental in Marika. Her most beloved son, the Golden Child who had brought peace between dragons and the Golden Order, who represented everything good about her reign, had been murdered. His death was not clean or merciful, but twisted, leaving him trapped in an existence more horrible than any true death could be. Marika's response was to shatter the Elden Ring. While the game doesn't explicitly tell us her exact reasoning, the connection between Godwin's death and the shattering is heavily emphasized by multiple sources. This appears to have been a deliberate choice, an act of rebellion against the entire system she had helped build. If the Golden Order couldn't protect Godwin, if the Greater Will's design resulted in such abominations, if being a god meant presiding over horrors without the power to prevent them, then the Order itself was fundamentally broken. Better to destroy it all than continue pretending it was worth maintaining. The shattering of the Elden Ring caused reality itself to malfunction. The great runes scattered, each one carrying a fragment of the ring's power. Marika's demigod children claimed these runes, and the strength contained within them drove them mad with ambition and possibility. War broke out across the lands between, as each shard-bearer fought to claim enough power to remake the Order according to their own vision. This war, called the Shattering, would drag on for uncounted ages because the demigods couldn't truly kill each other without destined death, which remained largely sealed away. Every battle was ultimately inconclusive, every victory temporary. The lands between became a nightmare of eternal conflict with no possibility of resolution, and the Greater Will, disgusted by the chaos, turned its back on the demigods, abandoning them to their endless war. Grace faded from their eyes. They were still divine, still powerful, but no longer guided or protected by the cosmic force that had elevated them. Part 7. The Demigods and Their Tragic Ideologies. Part 1. Ranni the Witch. Free Will Against Fate. Ranni is perhaps the most philosophically coherent of all the demigods. Her goal is clear: absolute freedom from the Greater Will's control, for herself and potentially for everyone. She orchestrated the Night of the Black Knives to kill her own body and escape the Two Fingers' destiny for her. She obtained the Fingerslayer blade to kill her two fingers permanently, and she seeks to establish an age of stars where the Greater Will's influence is removed entirely from the world. But Ranni's quest comes at tremendous cost. Godwin died so she could live in a different form. Her most loyal servant, Bled, created by the Two Fingers to be her shadow and protector, went mad when she killed the fingers he was bound to serve, forcing her to have him killed. E.g., her war counselor and teacher sacrificed himself to protect her quest. Countless others died to make her vision possible. There's a coldness to Ranni that makes sense when you understand what she's fighting for. She can't afford sentimentality or attachment because the Greater Will uses these things as chains to bind people to its design. Love, loyalty, duty, all of these can be weaponized to control behavior. So Ranni maintains distance, speaks in riddles, refuses to fully trust anyone until they've proven themselves beyond doubt. Her Age of Stars ending is intentionally ambiguous. She speaks of removing the Order far away, of a journey into fear and doubt and loneliness. This doesn't sound like paradise. It sounds like exile, like choosing the unknown over the certainty of oppression. But it's a choice, which is precisely what Ranni values above all else. Better to choose your own suffering than have happiness imposed upon you by forces you can't resist. The question that haunts Ranni's path is whether true freedom is possible or whether escaping one cosmic force just means falling under the influence of another. The dark moon she serves might not be an outer god like the Greater Will, but it's still a cosmic power with its own nature and demands. Can Ranni truly be free, or has she just chosen a different master? Miquella the Kind, Salvation Through Control. Miquella is presented initially as the most compassionate and benevolent of the demigods. He tried to cure his sister's rot. He created the Erdtree as a haven for the oppressed and outcasts. He developed unalloyed gold to resist the influence of outer gods. Everything about him suggests someone motivated by genuine desire to help. But the shadow of the Erdtree expansion reveals a more complex truth about Miquella's nature. His fundamental power is to compel affection, to make others love him. The bewitching branch description tells us that Miquella was adored by all, and the DLC confirms that this adoration was, at least in part, the result of his innate ability to charm others. He could bewitch people, make them devoted to his cause, even if it contradicted their own nature or desires. This power creates a profound ethical problem. How do you build a truly better world if you're influencing people's emotions and loyalty? How is your age of compassion different from the greater will's imposed order, if both involve removing people's genuine agency? Miquella may have had better intentions than other would-be gods, but his methods raise uncomfortable questions about consent and manipulation. The revelation in Shadow of the Erdtree that Miquella made a vow with Radagon, promising that the general would become his consort, raises further questions about Miquella's methods. The nature of this vow, and whether Radagon fully understood or agreed to its implications, remains ambiguous. Did Radagon genuinely want to be Miquella's consort and help establish a new age? Or was his agreement influenced by Miquella's bewitching power? The DLC suggests the latter, but leaves room for interpretation. Miquella's tragedy is that his desire to save everyone led him to employ methods that violated the very principles he claimed to champion. Compassion enforced through magical compulsion isn't really compassion. A dynasty built on bewitched loyalty is just another form of tyranny, even if it's gentler and kinder than the alternatives. His discarding of his love, his doubts, his very body through the Shadow Realm's ritual represents an attempt to become a pure embodiment of his vision, uncorrupted by human weakness or limitation. But in doing so, did he become less capable of genuine compassion? Can you truly care about others if you've removed your capacity for doubt? If you've abandoned everything that made you relatable and vulnerable? Malenia, the curse of perfection and decay. Malenia, Blade of Miquella, is defined by two contradictory states. She is a peerless warrior who has never known defeat, and she is also slowly rotting away from an incurable disease that will eventually consume her entirely. This tension between perfection and decay makes her perhaps the most tragic figure among all the demigods. She trained under a mysterious blind swordsman who had once sealed away an outer god of rot. From him she learned to fight with wings of unparalleled strength, developing a technique that made her unstoppable in combat. Miquella crafted her armor from unalloyed gold and created a needle to slow the rot's progression. Between her brother's inventions and her own martial prowess, she managed to become the most formidable warrior in the lands between despite her curse. But Malenia's perfection as a warrior couldn't solve her fundamental problem. She could defeat any opponent, win any battle, but she couldn't fight the rot consuming her from within. Every victory was ultimately meaningless because the real enemy was her own corrupted flesh, and that enemy couldn't be slain with a sword. Her relationship with Miquella defines her entire existence. She fights for him, protects him, serves as his blade precisely because he tried to save her when no one else could or would. When Miquella was taken from the Erdtree, Malenia marched to war against Radagon, the general who stood in the way of Miquella's plans. Their battle in Khalid would have catastrophic consequences. The Battle of Aeonia, Malenia's choice, the duel between Malenia and Radagon has become legendary in the lands between. Two of the mightiest demigods clashing in single combat, neither willing to yield, both fighting with everything they had. Radagon's gravity magic against Malenia's flowing blade, the star scourge against the undefeated warrior. It should have been glorious. Instead, it became a tragedy. Unable to defeat Radagon through martial skill alone, Malenia made a terrible choice. She embraced the rot she had fought against her entire life. She allowed it to bloom, releasing a scarlet Aeonia, a massive flower of pure corruption that nuked the entire region of Khalid. The rot didn't just kill, It transformed everything it touched. The land became a wasteland of disease. Radagon, infected by the rot, lost his sanity, becoming a savage beast who continued to fight even as he decayed. His soldiers watched their beloved general transformed into a mad thing that would eventually devour their corpses. An entire region was destroyed, countless lives ruined, all because Malenia couldn't accept defeat. Before releasing the Scarlet Bloom, Malenia whispered something to Radagon that we learn about in the shadow of the Erdtree. Miquella awaits thee, O promised consort. This reveals that the battle wasn't just about territory or power. It appears to have been about the vow Radagon had made to Miquella. Was Radagon trying to escape this promise? Was the battle Malenia's attempt to either force him to honor it or to take him down so Miquella could use his remains for the ritual? The exact circumstances remain unclear, but the connection between their duel and Miquella's plans is undeniable. After Caelid, Malenia fell into a coma. Her loyal knight Finlay carried her unconscious body all the way back to the Erdtree, fending off attackers the entire journey in an act of heroism that defies comprehension. Malenia slept at the base of the Erdtree, waiting for Miquella to return, slowly infecting the tree with rot even in her sleep. When the Tarnished eventually faces Malenia, she's still waiting, still hoping, still unable to accept that Miquella might never come back. Defeating her first phase causes her to bloom a second time, transforming her into the goddess of rot, a manifestation of the very curse she's spent her life fighting. The outer god of rot finally claims her fully, turning her into its avatar. If she blooms a third time, she'll become a true goddess, transcending her Empyrean form and existing as pure incarnation of decay. Whether this would mean losing herself entirely or achieving some kind of apotheosis is unclear. But it seems unlikely she'd want this transformation, which makes it even more tragic that her greatest achievements in battle are pushing her closer to a fate she never chose. Malenia's final words. When defeated in her second form, Malenia's last words are an apology to Miquella. Not anger, not defiance, not pleas for mercy, just Miquella, forgive me. She's sorry she failed to protect him, sorry she had to unleash the rot again, sorry she couldn't be stronger or better or more worthy of his faith in her. This defines her tragedy. She gave everything, became the perfect warrior, never lost a battle except her very last one, and still couldn't accomplish what truly mattered. All her strength was ultimately useless. All her victories meant nothing. The one person she fought for is gone, and her last contribution to his dream was becoming the thing she hated most. There's no redemption arc for Malenia, no moment where she realizes she was wrong and changes course. She dies still believing in Miquella's vision, still serving him, still faithful despite all evidence that this faith was misplaced. That's the true curse of perfection. It doesn't allow for growth or change, only the endless pursuit of an ideal that can never be reached. Part 8. The Demigods and Their Tragic Ideologies. Part 2. Ricard. Rebellion through becoming the monster. Praetor Ricard started as one of the Golden Order's champions, serving as a chief inquisitor hunting down heretics and enemies of Marika's rule. But somewhere along the way he became disgusted with what he was doing, with the hypocrisy and cruelty of the order he served. His response was radical. If he was going to rebel, he would do so in the most blasphemous way possible. He fed himself to the god-devouring serpent, a primordial creature of immense power that predated the Erdtree. The serpent consumed him, but rather than dying, Ricard merged with it, becoming a hybrid abomination of man and beast. This was deliberate desecration, a middle finger to everything the Golden Order represented. Where the Order demanded purity and hierarchy, Ricard embraced corruption and chaos. He established Volcano Manor as a base for rebels, heretics, and those who would oppose the Erdtree. His philosophy was simple: devour the gods, consume the divine, grow strong enough through blasphemy and consumption that no heavenly power could touch you. It's nihilistic, destructive, and ultimately self-defeating, because what comes after you've devoured everything? But Ricard didn't seem to care about after. He cared about vengeance. His covenant with Ranni, his sister, shows that his rebellion had some strategic elements. He helped her steal the Rune of Death, and she gave him the Blasphemous Claw, a weapon that could deflect the power of destined death. They were allied in their opposition to the greater will, even if their methods and ultimate goals differed dramatically. But Rykard's transformation cost him his humanity. By the time the Tarnished faces him, he's barely recognizable as the man he once was. The serpent has consumed most of his personality, leaving behind only hunger and rage. His grand rebellion has turned him into exactly what he claimed to oppose, a mindless force of consumption and destruction, no better than the divine entities he sought to overthrow. The tragedy of Rykard is that rebellion through becoming monstrous doesn't actually achieve freedom. It just creates a different form of slavery, this time to your own worst impulses and the nature of the thing you merged with. He thought he could control the serpent, use it as a tool. Instead, the serpent used him and devoured him from within more thoroughly than any Inquisitor's blade ever could have. Morgott, loyalty, despite rejection. Morgott the Omen King is perhaps the most heartbreaking character in all of Elden Ring because his tragedy is entirely self-inflicted. Born with the curse of horns, imprisoned beneath Leyndell as a shameful secret, denied grace and recognition despite being the son of a goddess and an Elden Lord, Morgott had every reason to rebel, to hate the Golden Order, to join his brother Mog in creating an alternative vision. Instead, he became its most devoted defender. When the Shattering occurred and the other demigods fought for power, when Leyndell needed protection and the Erdtree was under siege, Morgott was the one who stepped up. He claimed the throne as the veiled monarch, hiding his true nature from his subjects because he knew they would reject him if they saw his horns. He adopted the persona of Morgott the Fell Omen to hunt down champions before they could reach the capital. He dedicated everything to defending an order that had imprisoned him as a child. Why? The game never gives us a clear answer, leaving us to interpret Morgott's choices. Perhaps he believed that if he served faithfully enough, the Erdtree would finally grant him grace. Perhaps he loved his mother Marika, despite her treatment of him, and couldn't bear to see her world destroyed. Perhaps he simply couldn't imagine any alternative, any other path that made sense to him. Or perhaps his loyalty was a form of self-punishment, a way of proving to himself that he deserved his suffering by defending the system that caused it. His shackle, which can still bind him during boss fights, represents the permanent mark of his imprisonment. Even free, even King of Leyndell, even wielding a great rune, Morgott remains bound by the very chains he could have broken. He sealed away his own cursed blood in his sword, encasing it in stone, trying to deny his own nature in hopes of becoming acceptable to an order that would never truly accept him. When the Tarnished defeats him, Morgott's final words are devastating. "The throne's stained by my curse. Such shame I cannot bear. Even dying, he's ashamed of what he is, apologizing for existing, for being born wrong. He never learned to accept himself, never realized that the curse wasn't his, but the order's for rejecting him. The Greater Will abandoned the demigods, but Morgott never abandoned the Greater Will. He defended the Erdtree to his last breath, protecting a system that gave him nothing but suffering. And perhaps that's the point. Perhaps Morgott shows us what happens when you internalize oppression so completely that you become your own jailer, defending the very structure that keeps you imprisoned. Morgott, building a dynasty on blood and delusion, where Morgott responded to rejection with loyalty, Morgott responded with ambition. If the Golden Order wouldn't accept him, he would create his own order. If the Greater Will wouldn't grant him grace, he would find a different outer god to serve. If he couldn't be Marika's legitimate heir, he would establish a dynasty that had nothing to do with her legacy. Deep below the earth, Morgott made contact with the Formless Mother, an outer god who craved wounds and blessed those born with accursed blood. This entity welcomed what the Golden Order had rejected. The curse that made Morg an outcast became, in the Formless Mother's eyes, a gift. His blood burst into flame when he stood before her, transformed from a mark of shame into a source of power. Morg established the Morgwen dynasty in an underground palace, gathering followers who performed blood rites in service to the Formless Mother. The blood oath incantations derived from these rituals are powerful but disturbing, requiring practitioners to wound themselves and others to access divine power. This is a far cry from the Golden Order's emphasis on purity and order. The Formless Mother's gifts come with pain as a prerequisite. But Morg lacked one critical component for establishing a new age, an Empyrean to serve as God. He wasn't one himself, and Ranni and Malenia had their own plans. So he kidnapped his half-brother Miquella from the Erdtree, taking the slumbering Empyrean to Mohgwyn Palace with plans to raise him to godhood. The shadow of the Erdtree expansion reveals the tragic truth about Mohg's actions. He was being manipulated. Miquella had used his bewitching power to compel Mohg to kidnap him. The young Empyrean needed a vessel for his promised consort Radagon, and Mohg's body would serve that purpose once Miquella ascended at the Gate of Divinity. Mohg forced his blood on Miquella, trying to share his cursed blood with the young Empyrean, attempting to raise him to godhood in service to the formless mother. But Miquella never responded, never woke, never acknowledged Mohg's devotion or plans, because he was using Mohg rather than truly allying with him. The tragedy of Mohg is that he finally found acceptance and purpose, finally discovered an outer god who valued what he was, finally built something of his own, only for all of it to be revealed as delusion and manipulation. He wasn't creating a new age. He was being used as a pawn in someone else's scheme. Even his rebellion was controlled by forces he didn't understand. Godwyn, the cost of immortality and unfinished death. Godwyn the Golden represents a different kind of tragedy. The beloved prince, perfect in every way, whose death was so corrupted that he became worse than any living monster. He was described as gracious, powerful, heroic. He befriended ancient dragons and ended a war through diplomacy and strength. He was everything the Golden Order could have hoped for in Marika's firstborn. And then the Black Knife assassin struck, killing his soul while leaving his body alive. This wasn't mercy. It wasn't even clean assassination. It was transformation into an abomination, into something that spreads death and corruption wherever it exists, that cannot die but also cannot truly live, that multiplies and manifests across the lands between like a cancer in the world's flesh. The Prince of Death has no consciousness, no will, no awareness. The being that was Godwyn is simply gone, leaving behind only flesh that grows and spreads according to no logic anyone can comprehend. His face appears on the backs of crabs near tainted water. His corpse surrogates manifest in catacombs far from where his main body lies. Deathroot springs up wherever his influence reaches. Those who live in death worship, or at least acknowledge the Prince of Death, not because he offers them anything, but because he represents the possibility of existing outside the Erdtree's control. He proves that true death is possible, even if the form it takes is horrific. The undead find meaning in his meaningless existence. His friends tried to save him. Placidusax fought in his death dream until the dragon itself became corrupted. Miquella sought to resurrect him through an eclipse. Faya offered him a second life as the foundation for a new order, but nothing worked. Nothing helped, nothing could restore what the Black Knives had taken from him. Godwyn's tragedy is that he had no agency in any of this. He didn't choose to be sacrificed for Ranni's plan. He didn't choose to become the Prince of Death. He didn't choose to be a symbol for the undead or a corruption in the Erdtree. Things were done to him, and his body continues to exist as testament to those choices others made. He's simultaneously the most important and most powerless figure in the entire conflict. The Shattering War, demigods in conflict. After Marika shattered the Elden Ring and the great runes scattered among her children, the demigods went to war. This was the Shattering, a conflict that dragged on for ages with no victor because none of the combatants could truly die. It was war as perpetual motion machine, violence for its own sake, because the stakes that might make people willing to negotiate were removed. Malenia marched south from the Erdtree, humbling Godric the Grafted in battle before facing Radon in Caelid. Rykard gathered rebels at Volcano Manor. Morgott defended Lanedell against all comers. Moga built his palace underground. Ranni pretended to be dead while orchestrating events from behind the scenes. Each demigod pursued their own vision, their own path to claiming the throne of Elden Lord or establishing an entirely new order. The war devastated the lands between. Armies clashed repeatedly with inconclusive results. The land became scarred with perpetual battlefields where the same conflicts played out over and over. Soldiers who couldn't die fought wars they couldn't win for causes many of them no longer believed in or remembered. And the greater will, disgusted by the chaos, withdrew its grace from the demigods. They were abandoned, left to their eternal war without divine guidance or hope of resolution. This abandonment is what allows the Tarnished to return, because the greater will needs new champions, people uncorrupted by the Shattering, who might actually be able to end the stalemate and restore order. Part 9, The Weight of Eternal Cycles and the Ethics of Rebuilding. The burden of immortality. One of the central tragedies of Elden Ring is what happens when beings cannot die, but also cannot find meaning or purpose. The demigods are trapped in immortality, condemned to continue existing long past the point where their existence serves any purpose. They can't grow because they can't die and be reborn. They can't change because their fundamental nature is locked in place by their great runes and divine heritage. Morgott guards a tree that won't let him in. Malenia waits for a brother who will never return. Rykard devours without end because consumption is all his serpent nature knows. Godwyn spreads corruption. He has no awareness of spreading. These aren't lives. They're loops, patterns that repeat because there's no mechanism to break them. The removal of destined death was supposed to be a gift, a way to make life eternal and golden. Instead, it became a curse, trapping everyone in their circumstances with no possibility of true change. Death isn't just an ending, it's also a release, a way for things to finally be over when they need to be over. Without it, there's only eternal present, eternal struggle, eternal suffering for those who can no longer find joy in existence. The Tarnished, as someone who can die and respawn, who exists outside the normal rules of the Golden Order's immortality, represents the possibility of change precisely because they're still subject to death, even if it's temporary and reversible. They can learn from failure because failure exists for them in a way it doesn't for beings who simply continue regardless of outcome. The psychology of the Shattering War. What does it do to someone's mind to fight a war that can't be won or lost? To kill enemies who won't stay dead? To pursue victories that can't be consolidated into actual success? The Shattering represents the ultimate futility of conflict when neither side can impose a decisive conclusion. We see the psychological damage in various NPCs. Gideon Ofnir, the all-knowing, concludes that Marika's true goal is perpetual conflict, that she wants the Tarnished to struggle forever because struggle is its own purpose. He's wrong, but his conclusion makes sense if you're trying to find meaning in endless war. Some pattern, some design must explain why the suffering continues. The soldiers at various camps across the lands between have mostly forgotten what they're fighting for. They guard positions because that's what they've always done. They attack travelers because that's their role. The original causes of the war are lost, but the war itself continues because no one knows how to stop or what peace would even look like. This is what happens when you remove death from a conflict-prone world. Violence becomes its own ecosystem, self-sustaining, requiring no external justification because it's simply what is. The Shattering is hell, not because of any particular cruelty or suffering, but because it never ends and never can end within its own logic. The question of restoration. When the Tarnished finally has the opportunity to repair the Elden Ring and become Elden Lord, they face a fundamental ethical question. Should they restore the system that led to all this suffering? Yes, the Golden Order is broken now, but it was broken from the start. Its design contained the seeds of its own destruction. Restoring the Elden Ring in its original form, the Age of Fracture ending, just resets everything to an earlier save point. The same problems that led to the Shattering still exist. Marika is still imprisoned. The demigods are still trapped in their roles. Death is still sealed away. You've achieved nothing except turning back the clock to a state that we already know will fail. The Mending Runes offer variations on restoration. Goldmask's rune purges the order of its fickleness and uncertainty, attempting to make it more perfectly ordered, more mathematically precise. But can you fix a fundamentally flawed system by making it more of what it already is? If the Order's core design is the problem, perfecting that design just makes the problem more efficient. Fia's rune incorporates life within death, allowing those who live in death to exist as legitimate parts of the Order rather than as aberrations to be persecuted. This is genuinely progressive, expanding the Order's acceptance to include beings it previously rejected. But it's still Order, still a system that controls rather than liberates. The Blessing of Despair, Dung Eater's ending, corrupts the Order entirely, ensuring everyone will be born cursed, everyone will suffer. This isn't rebuilding, this is malicious sabotage, revenge against a world that made suffering possible by ensuring everyone shares in that suffering equally.
It's egalitarian only in the worst possible sense. Ranni's alternative.
The Age of Stars. Ranni's ending doesn't repair the Elden Ring in any traditional sense. Based on her dialogue, she takes the Order on a journey far away beyond the reach of the lands between, removing the Greater Will's direct influence from the world. This isn't restoration, it's more like controlled abandonment, removing divine authority while leaving the world itself intact to determine its own path. The Age of Stars represents uncertainty as philosophy. Ranni speaks of fear, doubt, and loneliness as inevitable parts of the journey ahead. She's honest about what her vision offers. Not paradise, but autonomy. Not happiness, but choice. Not comfort, but the dignity of self-determination, even if it leads to suffering. This ending terrifies people who need certainty, who want to believe there's some cosmic order that makes sense of everything. But it liberates those who've been crushed by systems that claim to know what was best for everyone. The question is whether humanity, or demi-humanity, is capable of thriving without gods to define meaning for them. Ranni's age might lead to chaos. It might lead to new forms of suffering. But it's suffering that people choose rather than suffering imposed from above. That distinction matters tremendously to anyone who's ever felt trapped by systems they didn't consent to joining. The frenzied flame, ending all cycles. The most radical ending is becoming the Lord of frenzied flame, embracing chaos and burning away all of reality. This isn't reformation or replacement, it's complete rejection of existence itself, a return to the one great through the destruction of everything that came from its fracturing. The frenzied flame's philosophy is that life is suffering, birth is cursed, and the only true mercy is to end it all and return everything to undifferentiated unity. This is nihilism as cosmic purpose, despair transformed into apocalyptic mission. And while it's clearly presented as a bad ending, the game never quite refutes the frenzied flame's core argument that existence as currently configured might be more cruel than merciful. After all, what has the Greater Will's creation actually achieved? Yes, there's diversity and beauty and individual experience, but there's also immense suffering, oppression, systems designed to control and limit, gods who abandon their worshippers, orders that reject their own children for being born wrong. Is all of that worth it? The frenzied flame says no. Choosing this ending means accepting that the experiment of existence has failed so completely that it's kinder to end it than to try to fix it. Malenia, who has guided the Tarnished throughout their journey, is so horrified by this choice that she vows to deliver destined death to the Lord of Frenzied Flame, to kill the one who would destroy everything. Even she, who has no particular loyalty to the Golden Order, can't accept the Frenzied Flame's solution, the ethics of playing God. Ultimately, all the endings force the Tarnished to play God, to make decisions about the fundamental nature of reality for everyone else. Repair the Elden Ring, and you're deciding billions of lives will continue under order. Choose Ranni's age, and you're deciding humanity has to figure things out without cosmic guidance. Embrace the frenzied flame, and you're deciding everything should end. No one elected the Tarnished to this position. No one asked them to make these choices. They're strong enough to defeat demigods and survive the trials required to reach the throne, which somehow qualifies them to reshape reality. This is the same arbitrary logic that granted Marika power in the first place, and we've seen how that worked out. The game doesn't offer a humble ending, a path where the Tarnished says, actually, I shouldn't be making these decisions for everyone, and steps aside. You have to choose an ending. You have to impose your vision on the world. The question is, which form of cosmic tyranny seems least objectionable? Which vision of order, or its absence, seems most likely to reduce suffering while preserving meaning? There's no right answer. Every ending is tragic in its own way, because the fundamental situation is tragic. The world is broken, the gods are broken, the systems are broken, and you're being asked to fix everything using tools that are themselves part of the problem. You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools, but those are the only tools available. We've covered immense ground in this exploration, from the cosmic fracture of the One Great to the personal tragedies of each demigod, from the rise of the Golden Order to its catastrophic collapse, and through it all, we've seen the same patterns repeating: power that corrupts, Order that oppresses, rebellion that transforms into new forms of tyranny, cycles that trap everyone involved regardless of their intentions. Elden Ring doesn't offer easy answers or simple morality. It presents a world where nearly everyone is trying to do what they think is right, or at least what they think is necessary, and nearly everyone causes immense suffering in the process. Marika tried to create a stable order and ended up building a cage for herself and everyone else. The demigods pursued their various visions and tore the world apart. The Tarnished is given the power to fix things, but no clear guidance on what fixing actually means. The tragedy of order isn't that it fails, it's that it succeeds for a while, creating systems and structures and hierarchies that seem stable and permanent until inevitably the flaws in the design become impossible to ignore and everything collapses. The Erdtree was glorious until it became a prison. The Golden Order brought peace until it created the conditions for endless war. Immortality seemed like a gift until it became a curse. And yet, despite all this tragedy, despite the cycles of suffering and the weight of divine mistakes, there's something profound in the persistence of hope. Morgoth defended the Erdtree until his last breath, knowing it would never truly accept him but choosing loyalty anyway. Malenia waited for Miquella despite all evidence he would never return, because faith sometimes matters more than likelihood. Ranni orchestrated her own death and the deaths of others in pursuit of genuine freedom, willing to sacrifice everything for a chance at autonomy. These stories matter not because they have happy endings, but because they reveal what happens when beings of tremendous power confront the limitations of their circumstances. They show us that even gods and demigods can be trapped, can suffer, can make choices they regret. They remind us that power and divinity don't protect you from tragedy. Sometimes they guarantee it. The lands between are a monument to the cost of trying to impose order on a universe that might not want or need it. Every ending available to the Tarnished involves wrestling with this fundamental question: do we restore order, replace it, or destroy it entirely? And the fact that there's no obviously correct answer, no path that clearly minimizes suffering and maximizes flourishing, is itself the point. We're left with uncertainty, ambiguity, the terrifying freedom to choose without knowing what the right choice is. And perhaps that's the only honest ending possible for a story about systems that claim to have all the answers, but only created more questions. Thank you all for joining me on this journey through one of the most complex and tragic mythologies in gaming. I hope this exploration has given you a deeper understanding of the forces at play in Elden Ring, the motivations driving each character, and the philosophical questions the game raises about power, order, freedom, and the price we pay for civilization. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Elden Ring's lore, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. There's always more to explore in these games, more connections to make, more tragedy to uncover. Until next time, may you find your own path through the lands between, whatever form that takes. This has been Daily Lore with Grandpa Ben. Thank you and goodbye.